Screwed, it's trashy, it ain't too classy, it's Hangover Radio.
Alright guys, what's the story? Welcome back. It's Mark Zolo here from NaughtyNova.com, and today we have a very special guest, Andrew MacLeod. He is an author, adventurer and public speaker. He's written a book called A Life Half Lived. He's been to 140 countries. He was there for the Rwandan genocide, the Pakistani earthquakes, the Asian tsunami. This guy has lived an amazing life, and he has some very interesting perspectives as well. I first met Andrew in the Campbell Apartments, which is a little speakeasy in New York City. I must say, fascinating character. So let's just jump right into it. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
For viewers and listeners, Andrew, people don't know you. Tell me about yourself.
My background, I'm Australian. I'm a qualified lawyer and army officer, specialised in war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide, and I need to specify there the prevention of rather than perpetration of. After spending a short time as a shipping and transportation lawyer, I worked for the International Committee for the Red Cross, first in former Yugoslavia during the conflicts there, and then into Rwanda during the aftermath of the genocide and the ongoing wars with Democratic Republic of Congo. Did a short stint in Australian politics, then went into the United Nations and ran major natural disaster operations in both humanitarian settings, post-conflict and natural disasters. And then left there in 2008 and 2009 after getting a bit disillusioned at the lack of effectiveness and lack of efficiency of the United Nations, and spent a fair bit of time now advising companies on how to adjust their footprint, particularly in the developing world, to get both social outcome for communities and improve profitability. So I now sit on the board of a bank in New York, a construction company in Australia, and I'm a visiting professor at King's College in London looking at public policy issues. And I'm a passionate traveller, having visited 141 countries so far, and have written a book, A Life Half Lived, which talks about life as an aid worker in its first two-thirds and why the private sector is a better solution to international development than the non-for-profit world in the last one-third. So that's me.
Oh, that was very comprehensive, fantastic. So people have a good idea of your life story. That we were talking briefly before this was recording. We tried to record it earlier, but we had a bit of a fuck up. And I was asking you what your favorite or what countries gave you the most impact.
Yeah.
And the three you said were Rwanda, Pakistan, and Ethiopia. Go to Rwanda first.
Well, I actually said four because Iceland was on there just for the geography.
Oh, Iceland, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a story in your book from Rwanda that's very harrowing. Tell listeners about that.
So during the genocide and aftermath, the Tutsis were being killed by the Hutus, and they, in many places, would force people into local churches and throw hand grenades in and butcher people inside these churches. And one of them was in a place called Nyatarama, about an hour's drive outside Kigali, the capital. And walking in there were 3,500 rotting human corpses at my feet. And the first thing that strikes you is the smell.
3,500.
Yeah, they've been pushed in, killed, more pushed in, killed, more pushed in, killed. And
Jesus Christ, man.
And the first thing that strikes you is the smell. And it's a very musky smell, and I often describe it as very close to the scent of the scent of love. That musky smell you get in the middle of lovemaking is very close to death, except death burns in the back of your nostrils. And even when I talk about it now, I still feel it burning in the back of my nostrils when I think of what it was like in there. And on top of this pile of bodies and bones was a baby's head, not the body, just the baby's head, and its empty eye socket stared straight at me of a baby.
The head was just cut off?
Yeah, it had been. And
they cut the baby's head off.
It almost had been placed there as the crowning jewel. And
Jesus, dude.
This baby's eyes...
Were these Tutsis?
Yeah, they're all Tutsis, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all Tutsis that... no problem. They're all Tutsis that had been killed. And it's the moment I describe as moving from agnostic to atheist, because the theologians would tell you that God is all powerful and benevolent. And I stood in this church and looked at these bodies and looked at this baby's head and said, well, if God is benevolent and this happened, then he's not powerful. And if he's powerful and this happened, then he's not benevolent. So that's the moment I say that God fails the logical test. And when I say this to theologians now, they say, oh, well, God operates in mysterious ways and all of those people are in a better place. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make up for the fact that they were butchered mercilessly and that child's head was taken off its body. You know, it's so that left a very, very strong impact. And the other country that left a very strong impact is Pakistan for a very different reason. And the reason in Pakistan, I was there following the 2005 earthquake. 75,000 people were killed, 3.5 million people made homeless in a 90-second shake. And I had to set up the humanitarian operations, and the Pakistan Army were just a fantastic partner to deliver all this humanitarian assistance. And we managed to keep 3.5 million people alive over a 6-month winter. And being so deeply embedded with the Pakistanis, they actually forget you're a foreigner, and the strength of the friendships that you make with these people are astonishing. And the geography and the landscape of that country is unbelievable. So even though Pakistan gets an enormous amount of bad press outside the country, when you're inside there, you see the warmth and the humanity of the people, the strength and the willingness of their people. And you also get to understand in a much more detailed way the battle within Islam between radicals, moderates and extremists. And every time I hear the right wing in Western countries, every time there's been a terrorist attack and you hear the right wing scream, when will moderate Islam speak out against radical Islam? My response is, well, they are. You're just not listening. And every time someone says, when will moderate Islam speak out? The only response I have now is, well, when will you listen? Because they are speaking out and they are dying. Many, many more moderate Muslims are dying at the hands of radical Islamic extremism than Christians are.
Okay, well, I think I want to get into like Islam and stuff like that a little bit later. We'll go back to it. But another country you were saying is Ethiopia, where I was telling you that I share an equal love for that place, just the history, the food,
But you haven't been to Lalibela. And Lalibela is a crowning jewel of Ethiopia, and I compare it with Petra in Jordan, and I say if you're impressed with Petra in Jordan, Lalibela makes Petra look like an IKEA prefabricated house.
And it's so for people who don't know, it's in northern Ethiopia they have this place where they built 13 churches into the ground. They carved. And you
think about this big basalt plain where they carved a square trench down, leaving a freestanding square pillar. They then carved that into a cross shape and then hollowed it out from the inside to make a church. And you think about this, they had to hollow it out on the inside, leaving the walls thick enough to hold up the structure, but not so thick that there was no room inside. And they did it without any modern technology. It's absolutely astonishing.
Oh, you're killing me. I'm going to have to go back again for the third time. I intend to, anyway. I'll be going back there for the whole of my life, I'm sure.
Well, like I said before, to make you feel better about it, I've been to Peru 4 times and haven't been to Machu Picchu.
Shame.
Machu Picchu is not that old. It was only built in about the 1500s. Yeah? If you go up to Corral... Yeah. If you go... No, seriously. 1500s? About that.
The way people go on about it, you'd swear it was the pyramids.
No, I'm glad you mentioned pyramids. Because if you go north of Lima to a place called Corral, it's the second oldest, possibly the oldest human constructions in the world, and some people say they're older than the pyramids in Egypt.
In Peru?
In Peru. And if you go to my website, andrewmacleod.com.au, and click on travel and look at some of my travel videos, I've got a travel video there from Corral that tells you about it.
Have you heard about that place, the new place in Turkey they found, Glad Tepe or something?
I've heard about it. Now I want to go. And by the way, the other thing...
It's closed off to the public at the minute.
Oh, you can fix that.
Yeah. I'm sure you got connections, Andrew.
Yeah, but have you been to another place they say are the oldest human constructions in the world, or where you're living at the moment, in Malta?
I live... Oh, in Malta, yeah. They have the down south. That's they got people working on it.
It's just behind the airport. It's an old temple.
There's an Irish guy over here who's an archaeologist there, and he's working on that. Working on that area. Yeah. I took over. He was singing in the local Irish pub, and I took over his job singing. But he's working on that project. He's a great lad. Yeah. So 141, and we're just talking about how you count 205 countries, right?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah. And that is a country that it's got to be a member of the UN, have an International Olympic Committee, or I just think you should be a country.
So you include Western Sahara,
Hong
Kong, Palestine.
Well, see, Western Sahara I include because I think it should be a country. Hong Kong and Palestine are included because they've got international Olympic committees.
What about when it comes to flags? We don't want to talk about that anymore.
My flag score is not very good.
I somehow doubt that. But anyway, what I was going to say to you. If you look at the criteria for a country, though, what about, we're talking about Nagorno-Karabakh not being a country and stuff. Do you ever base it on the Montevideo Accords? The whole, it maybe not be recognized, but if it has its own, territory, and the government are in control of that territory, and they have a permanent population.
Yeah, I mean that is both customary and treaty international law around the right to self-determination. But then you have a look at what they're wanting. If you look at Nagorno-Karabakh, they actually want to leave Azerbaijan and join Armenia. They don't really want an independent country. Same with South Ossetia. Same with Abkhazia. They want to leave Georgia and join Russia. So you can't really say they're an independent country. That's different from Kosovo that wants to break away from Serbia and be independent. And a lot of countries now recognise Kosovo's independence. So it's complicated. It's actually not as easy a question as it should be. No,
it's definitely not. What is a country is not an easy question, because then you have the United Nations Security Council, who can veto any
membership of the United Nations. But that doesn't necessarily mean you count as a country. Because for many years...
True. Under international law, that's right as well.
Because Switzerland for many years wasn't a member of the UN, but it was definitely a country.
Yes.
Now, a friend of mine has developed an app called Country Counter. And you can get it on the App Store, and that's the screenshot of it. And he has... So that's my map. They're the blue are the countries I've been to, and the grey are the ones I haven't. So you see my gap.
Oh, you've left out a lot of Africa, I noticed. You haven't been to West Africa.
That's my big gap, is West and Central Africa. I've done Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania.
Fun, man.
Yeah. So that is the big gap.
And Libya isn't on there. I'm going there in December.
I know.
Hopefully if I get the visa.
Now, you can see that according to his app, I've gone to 134 countries and 21 territories. And what he counts as countries and territories is slightly different from what I do. So everyone has a different number and a different way of counting. So according to him, my total is 155, but then he separates England, Wales, and Scotland. I don't.
Oh, okay. Wait, who did that? Where is he from?
He's from Australia. His name's Tim Holding. He used to be a government minister, actually. But his total of countries is 196. So he's got less countries than I do.
That's the general number. Most people say 196, 197.
Yeah.
That's kind of the consensus.
If
you type it into Google, I think.
I
think that's what it gives you.
So if you count 196, I'm 134 of those 196, and I've got 62 to go.
Nice. How long are you gonna? Are you in any rush, or do you have a kind of time when you'd like to finish that?
I didn't leave Australia for the first time until I was 26 years old, and I turned 50 next month. So this has been done in 24 years.
So listen to that. Anyone who's like 25 or under, and you never left the country. Andrew only started traveling at 26, and he's been up to 134 countries.
140, 130, depending on how you count it.
You count 140. Well, it depends
I
if your
count
app is different.
141. Yeah. I mean, if we go up by Tim's app, as I said, it gives me 134. So that's a neutral number. Anyway, it's a lot.
So you just went on a trip to Central Asia and did the Silk Road.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Really fascinating. And if you want to, I've just, in yesterday's Independent in the United Kingdom, I've just got an article in there. It's a 2,500 word description with a couple of photos.
That's cool. You've written for the Independent. You've written for a few publications, right?
Yeah.
A few.
Yeah. It's a way of offsetting some of the travel costs. And if nothing else, if you can establish to the tax department that your trip is earning some income, then the whole thing is tax deductible, and you can offset the whole income against it. Yeah.
That's genius.
And nowadays, put your own house out on Airbnb. So my place was on Airbnb in London.
I do that.
While I was
I do
away.
Airbnb. The last 3 days I was Airbnb. It's brilliant.
No, but the one I'm living in London, I put on Airbnb. So I rent that. Don't tell my landlord, because you're not allowed to. So I did some maths the other day.
Nor am I, man.
Yeah. The revenue from the Airbnb flat plus the media's payments and a couple of other things, it was a cost-neutral trip, which is always a nice way of doing it. But I started in Armenia. I went Armenia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, then into Western China. And it was really fascinating. It was really fascinating on a couple of bases. One is that the history we learned in European schools, and I'll include Australia and Ireland and even Britain in that, Western schools, goes like this. The ancient Greeks begat the Romans begat the Dark Ages begat the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, Age of Empire, creation of the United States, and boom, that's where we are. The problem with that narrative is it leaves out 1,000 years, from roughly the year 300 to the year 1300, where Europe was going backwards, but everywhere else was going forwards.
Was this like during the Inquisition and stuff?
Yeah, and all of that. What you had Tamerlane growing, you had the Islamic Persian empires, the perfection of mathematics, the invention of the number zero. Like, think about this. When the Roman Empire fell, they still had Roman numerals. And what was the Roman numeral for zero?
Yeah, I've actually saw this in Cosmo recently, that there was no zero.
There was no zero. And without zero, you can't have the decimal system. You can't have 10, you can't have 100, you can't have 1,000. So it was actually a mathematician called Muhammad al-Khwarizmi that perfected the use of the number zero and invented algebra in the year about 800 in Uzbekistan, just down the road from Samarkand, an amazing capital city. And 200 years before Galileo said the world was round, another Islamic astronomer called Ulugh declared the world.
Yeah, I've heard about this as well.
So it's bizarre that we still say, nothing happened for 1,000 years, and then the Europeans invented all this shit. Actually, a whole bunch of people invented it before the Europeans and went, what are you on about?
Well, you talk about the first civilization was Mesopotamian, was it modern day Iraq?
Yeah, here's a little bit of trivia for you. What part of the Mesopotamian, particularly the Sumerian culture, still exists today?
Sumerian culture. It's not in
physically it's
in
Kurdistan.
No, between the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers.
Between the Tigris and the Euphrates, but the Sumerians had a counting system based on 6. Not 10 like the decimal system.
Okay.
Have you ever wondered why we have 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute? It's the one remaining thing from the Sumerian culture that's come all the way through history is the basis of time counting in units of 6.
Now that is an interesting bit of trivia. That is interesting bit. So what was your
But let me give you another bit of thought from this Silk Road trip. So, understanding that there was that 1,000 years where a whole bunch of stuff happened that the Europeans ignored, you also look at the way those empires rose and the empires fell. The Greeks, the Romans, the Zoroastrian Persians, then the Christians, then the Islamic Persians. How did they rise and fall? They were all at their strongest when they were at their most tolerant, allowing other religions and other cultures and learning from other people. When they became intolerant, that presaged the fall of each of the empires. And if you take that theory, you're at your strongest when you're at your most tolerant, you fall when you become intolerant, you start to say, well...
is that true, though?
Largely it is. And then you turn around and say, Christians are becoming more and more intolerant. Western society is becoming more and more intolerant. Islamic society is becoming more and more intolerant. But the Chinese society is becoming more and more tolerant. And then add that onto this. In 2013, President Xi in China announced a One Belt, One Bridge policy, which a lot of people didn't fully understand, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank that Europeans have sort of got blinkers to. But what he's done is the One Belt is creating a seaborne trading route that goes from China through the South China Sea to South Asia, India, Pakistan, across to East Africa. And the One Bridge is a land bridge of the former Silk Road countries, and trillions of dollars of infrastructure investments going in there now on rail, on pipelines, on roads. Yeah. And they've just opened up the rail line.
The Chinese are putting so much money in Africa, man. They're seeing the future. This is what I'm saying. Like, we think democracy is the be-all and end-all, but the difference is when the Chinese get in a room together, they're all thinking 100 years in advance, where politicians in the West are thinking in election cycles. They're thinking short-term. They're thinking appealing to the voters.
I agree entirely, but this is not something that is going to happen. It's something that is happening. And just like other empires have risen and fallen, if we say who knows how long the Greeks were a major empire for. The Romans were a major empire for 500 years. Then came the Zoroastrians for a few hundred years. Then came the Islamic Persians for a few hundred years. And give or take, let's call Western Christian culture an empire. It's been dominant from, give or take, 1500 to today. But we're on the decline. And I think future historians will mark the year 2008 as the year we reached the tipping point. The global financial crisis was actually the point at which our culture went, nah. After that, China is rising, and not rising, they're returning to global dominance, as is India. In the year 1500, China and India were 87% of the global economy. In the year 1950, they were less than 10% of the global economy. And the reason is that industrial revolution, that major spurt of individual productivity, allowed Western Europe to dominate. We moved from a world where your relative economic size and your relative population size was more or less the same. Individual productivity spurted in the West, and that gave us economic dominance. As through communication technology, we spread that individual productivity to everybody, the world is returning, not rising, returning to a point where your relative economic size and your relative population size is going to be around about the same. And that's why China is not rising, it's returning. It's not why India is rising, it's returning. And in the future, they will be the dominant economies. Now, while in other times in history, it might have taken 50, 100, 200 years for empires to really swap, this switch from white Anglo-Saxon Christian dominance to Asian Chinese Islamic dominance is going to take place, or it is taking place now, and it'll be finished in 20 years. You and I will be able to sit down when we're 70 and we're going to be able to say, it's happened, it's done. We are living through a time in history, a great epochal shift. So anyone that's wondering, how do they position themselves? How do they position their businesses? How do they position their children? Look at the writing on the wall. Look at the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Look at how the infrastructure is going through what used to be the Silk Road, which will be the new main trading corridor, which Europe is kind of on the periphery of. The US hasn't signed up, and Australia is busy putting a gun against its own head saying we don't want to play this game. It's nuts. It's happening. Get on the train or get out of the way.
I feel like I want to open my bar globe here and go for a drink after that, man.
Yeah, I know. We've just got to teach the Chinese how to appreciate wine.
And freedom of speech.
No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, I don't know what do you think about the whole migrant crisis in Europe?
Oh, look, that's complicated. I think, let me look at it from a really weird angle for you. In 2012, it was the first year that Australia had more people leave the job market through growing old than entering the job market through growing up. We used to talk about the future ageing population problem. Well, in Australia, the future ageing population problem became the present ageing population problem in the year 2012.
I know where you're going with this. You're talking about Germany, right? The senile population.
Yep, and Germany has solved their ageing population problem in one decision. I just let in 1 million working age people who want to work into my economy. Boom. Whereas England, you're going to...
I agree with you. I think that was the motive behind there, because if you look at the pensions, the relative pensions they have in Germany far exceed that of other countries. And for you to support that structure, you're going to need people paying tax.
You go from 8 taxpayers per person, depending on tax, to 4 taxpayers per person, depending on the tax.
This is what I'm talking about. People think it's not an act of charity. It's in their own self-interest. No. This is what people fail to see.
Yeah, and you know how dumb Brexit is? Brexit is so dumb because Britain...
You campaigned to remain, and you predicted. You predicted they would actually get it.
Yeah, I did, but catch this. Britain didn't have an ageing population problem because it imported its working age people from Europe. All these Polish, etc., all the Eastern Europeans came to Britain, actually plugged that gap. And now they're going to open that gap voluntarily by closing off the Europeans that are coming in. And here is another one of these ironies. A whole bunch of the people that voted Brexit because we want to control our borders and we don't like this migration, what you're going to do is swap white European migration for non-white, non-European migration. It's got to come in to keep the economy afloat. And these, the rednecks and the racists element of Brexit vote, not everyone who voted Brexit was, but some people were, they're going to be really shocked because they've just swapped a whole bunch of white migrants for a whole bunch of black migrants.
Well, I think it's more of a case where it's the type of migrants you want, because I mean, if you look at the stats, certain migrants contribute to society, and certain migrants don't, and I think it's a cultural thing. Like generally, I think Indians are a net contributor, but like Pakistanis would be a net drain, I guess, but with welfare and stuff.
Actually, the data actually shows migrants are net contributors, and migration overall are net contributors, and even asylum seekers and refugees, the studies show they add 1.1 jobs to every migrant or every refugee that comes in. In other words, for every 10 refugees, you create 11 jobs. So they're not pinching our jobs, they're actually creating more jobs to allow people to work. And when you look at Australia, Australia's gone nearly 30 years without a recession. Australia didn't have a financial crisis. And a lot of people say, it was the mining industry. I'm like, no, it's one of 6 factors. The mining industry was one of 6 factors that has kept the Australian economy going well. One is a well-regulated banking system. We didn't have exotic investment mechanisms like the Americans. Second is a very flexible dollar. Our dollar keeps going up and down like a yo-yo, from 90 US cents to 60 to 100 down to 70. It's a really good buffer of the economy. The third thing is a very flexible labour market, allowing for underemployment rather than unemployment. The fourth one is the impact of the mining system. The fifth one is the psychological impact of the stimulus package. But the sixth one is ongoing population growth. And population
but you guys do things right in Australia. You guys are very picky with who you let in. And you guys are really smart. They have the point system. You make sure you're getting good people in who are going to contribute to the economy. Compared to how they handled Germany was just open floodgates. I think it was a bit of a disaster, frankly. Look, you guys are doing things right. I think Australia as a model is a good model for that. But they turn people away too.
But let me throw you a stat. Australia, I think, is a good model. I do think the point system is good. But Australia has a migration rate twice that of the United Kingdom. So I used to laugh when Michael Gove and people like this said, we need an Australian-style point system to reduce migration into the United Kingdom. I'm like, no, an Australian-style point system will increase migration, and it will increase migration because the way it works in Australia is you get all the businesses lobbying for their particular employee types to be included in the point system. And then the politicians know very well there's this ageing population problem that needs to be solved, but we haven't found a way of discussing within our communities issues like this openly and maturely. The only solution you've got when you've got a shrinking workforce is you either cut services to the NHS because your tax base is smaller. That's not going to fly. You massively increase taxation rates. That's not going to fly. You increase borrowing. Well, you can't do that. You borrow too much. That's not going to fly. Or you've got to find some way of increasing the workforce that pays tax. And that's done one of 2 ways. Massive babies, which has a 20-year lag period, or migration. Or massive cuts to services or massive increases to taxation. That's what's facing economies like Great Britain.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with migration. I don't think most people do, but there's definitely a huge swing to the right in Europe and the United States and also against specifically Islamic migration.
Yeah, and now
do you think Islam is incompatible with Western values? Because I honestly think that the religion itself it's not conducive for integration in the West.
Well, let me just come back to the point about England, and I'll link it with that. The great irony of Brexit is, where were the main migrants coming from in Britain up to today? From Europe.
Probably like Poland and Lithuania.
Largely Christian, largely white. And where will future migrants come from, particularly if they want to refocus migrants into the Commonwealth countries? There'll be a higher proportion from Pakistan, a higher proportion from India, which, remember, there are more Muslims in India than there are in Pakistan. So, ironically, Brexit is going to lead to an increased proportion of Islamic migration. So if you don't like Islamic migration, you've shot yourself in your right foot and your left foot.
I think that is exactly what they don't want.
I know.
And the people in power don't want. And I think it's very hard to predict what will happen with the migration thing there. Because it seems to me that they don't mind. It's more so Muslim immigration that they're concerned about.
So let's go to your question.
I don't think they're not concerned about
Islamic. Let's go to your question about Islamic migration. Then here's something else that struck me when I was going up and down the Silk Road. Do you know what the historians of the time were writing in the years, the late 600s and the 700s, as Muhammad's troops were coming up through Central Asia? They were writing that Islam, Christianity, and Judaism were merely sects of the same religion. And before you get all narky like some people will.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
They're the same. It's Yahweh, the same like Abrahamic God.
Yeah.
They're all Abrahamic religions.
They all worship the God of Abraham, right? And the Kaaba in Mecca is built on the foundations of Abraham's son's first temples. So actually, Jews built the foundations of the Kaaba in Mecca.
Oh God! Do not say that to.
That's a statement of fact. Google
bring that. That's amazing.
Yeah,
if that's true. But I don't think I'm surprised the Saudis are not fucking burning it to the ground.
No, but they're not, because the Saudis and this is something I learned in Pakistan. To go back to one of your earlier questions, Islam and your average Islamic person has a much better understanding of the interaction between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity than Christians or Jews do. And the reason
is because the history is longer.
That's it. So the Jews have one religious book, the Torah. The Christians call the Old Testament.
Yeah.
The Christians have two religious texts, the Old Testament, the Torah, and the New Testament. And
they have the so-called New Testament.
That's right. And then the Muslims have three texts, the Quran, the New Testament, and the Old Testament. And most people would tell you and know the most important prophet in Islam is Muhammad. Who is the second most important prophet in Islam?
I would say Jesus, obviously.
Jesus Christ. And when you boil it down and you say, okay, these three religions all believe in the God of Abraham, they all believe in heaven, and they all believe in...
And they're all retarded.
And they all believe in a code of conduct to get into heaven, and the code of conduct to get into heaven is based on the Ten Commandments from Moses. That is common to all. Now, I often, and I offend people when I say this, I don't mean to, but it does, really the only substantive difference between Judaism, Islam, and Christianity is the definition of Jesus Christ. If you think Jesus Christ is a teacher, you're a Jew. If you think Jesus Christ is a prophet, you're a Muslim. And if you think Jesus Christ is a Messiah, you're a Christian. The fundamentals of the three religions are basically the same. So if you then, what's different is the way man misinterprets the texts and creates violence coming out of those religions. The Torah, the New Testament, and the Quran all have passages that can be manipulated to inspire and have been manipulated to inspire violence. It just comes through radical Islam more often now. Now, when you say, is Islam consistent with Western values, I'm going to throw back at you, well, what Islam? Because most moderate Islam is consistent with Western values. Because moderate Islam...
Let me just pause you there.
Yeah.
I'll just grab a glass. I just feel like a drink. It's called Hangover Radio for a reason, Andrew.
Yeah. Well, it's ironic that we're now talking about moderate Islam as you're pouring yourself a booze.
Last night.
And we've got to stress to your listeners and to your viewers here, just in case anyone has any doubt, both you and I don't believe in God and not religious in any way. So I do this type of analysis. One is an interesting external analysis, but secondly, to understand the interrelationship between politics, religion, military, and business. Those four interrelate everywhere, and if you understand how those four are coming together, you can be incredibly powerful. And if you look at why Muhammad was so successful with his religion, is because he understood the interrelation.
He was a warmonger.
He was a warmonger, and he was a merchant.
Yeah. But here's the thing. So you wanted to talk about integration, right? I agree that understanding is key.
Yeah.
First of all, yes. I think too many people are just anti-Islam and they don't know the nuances and the Wahhabist movements, in the 1800s and where it got radicalized from Saudi Arabia, and it used to be a bit more moderate. Yeah. And they don't know that Sunni. Most people don't know anything about Islam. So I think the first thing is definitely to understand it. But recent polls in the UK have shown that, we talk about radical and moderate, but even moderate, the majority of Muslims in the UK find homosexuality an unacceptable lifestyle choice, over 90%. You have 25% who believe Sharia law should be passed in the UK, and 10% believe that it's okay to kills someone who insults the Prophet Muhammad. I mean, and these are moderate Islam. This is moderate Islam.
I'll say this. If you did a survey in the southern United States, they'd come up with the same data on homosexuality as the Muslim communities in the United Kingdom. And just look, at the way our societies are tearing ourselves apart about gay marriage. I mean, for God's sake, just allow gay people to marry and move on. It's unacceptable to kill someone that insults the Prophet. There's no justification for that in my mind. And one of the things about migration that I think is critical, if you're coming from one culture into another culture, you need to accept the practices of the culture you're going into. So, I give the story. When I first moved into Islamabad, I found the gym around the corner from home, and I thought, whacked on the shorts and the...
Islamabad is the capital of Pakistan.
Yeah, and I whacked on the shorts and the T-shirt to run around to the gym, do a workout, and then jog home. And I got half a block before the abuse turned me around because I didn't realise I was wearing shorts. Even men shouldn't be wearing shorts.
You're showing those sexy ankles.
Exactly, or as they say in Islamic bucks party, show me your eyes, show me your eyes. But I could sit there and complain and say, no, I should be allowed to wear my shorts. I should be allowed to wear what I want. But no, I'm going into their culture. That was not acceptable in their culture, so I changed my behaviour in their culture. In the same way, people coming into my culture should accept the basic tenets of my culture. And one of the basic tenets of my culture is tolerance of difference, which means, no, you don't have... And freedom of speech. So...
Yeah. Ironclad. I think that's ironclad. I don't believe in hate speech laws. I don't believe in anything that censorship whatsoever. I believe in the free marketplace of ideas, and bad ideas get weeded out.
No, there is limits to free speech. I mean, the easiest... you
think so?
Pedophilia.
You think so? But I mean, no, we're talking about freedom of speech, not freedom of expression. I'm not saying...
Okay.
I'm not... Yeah. I'm not talking about... I'm not talking about like some sort of anarchist libertarianism that everyone's free to do what they want. I'm talking about
that's an important differentiation.
I mean freedom of speech completely.
So long as it doesn't,
long as
it doesn't inspire hatred and violence.
I disagree.
No, I don't think. Well, we'll
some ideas are worth hating. I think some ideas are abhorrent, and some ideas are better than other ideas. I think. Because once you enact hate speech laws, you are at the will of who is controlling these laws and what constitutes hate speech. For example, look at Twitter and Facebook and stuff. They're starting to censor conservatives who are making legitimate criticisms of the establishment or the far left, and they're being censored off. So I think it becomes politicized when you enact hate speech laws. I think it's very
I agree with you to a point, and we'll have to agree to disagree on some point, but someone who's standing on a street corner saying, right, let's beat that person up there, no, that needs to be stopped.
You think it? Well, I mean, that's kind of you're obviously making it a can you give a bit more of a concrete example? Let's say someone on the internet promoting, let's say, neo-Nazism, or
promoting neo-Nazism, okay, but promoting neo-Nazism by going and beating up a whole lot of Jewish people, not okay.
No, I think violence. I agree. Violence is not the answer. I don't think. I wouldn't legalize violence in any shape or form. But I'm saying words themselves.
Where do words become violence, and where do you draw the line? Do you draw the line?
I mean, I don't think words are violence. It's not like a punch. There's a clear difference between physical and verbal.
Go back to what Rwanda we were talking about earlier. One of the ways the genocide in Rwanda was perpetrated was Radio de Mille Collines, Radio of a Thousand Hills, was broadcasting, go kill the cockroaches, go kill the cockroaches. Now, that guy on the radio, he was only using words. But in the end, he was convicted under the genocide laws because he was encouraging and inspiring people to go and perpetrate acts of mass murder.
That's a good example. Yeah, that's a good example. But I think nowadays with everyone has internet and smartphones and access to information, people don't believe mainstream media anymore, and people can get their own information. People are more educated.
So
there's no more ignorant people, really.
Well, that's not true. That's not true either. If you look at the algorithms of social media, what social media is now doing is feeding to people information they're more
Echo
likely to
chambers.
respond to. So it's creating the echo chamber. So what we're actually doing is we are polarizing our
Twitter too.
communities and Twitter. So we're polarizing our communities, and we're making people less able or less willing to get alternative viewpoints. We're becoming more like North Korea, and I've been to North Korea as well. But let me just go back half a step. If I took your point about we shouldn't stop words, then what you're saying is we shouldn't crack down on Islamic State's social media portfolios.
Sorry, say it again?
If we take your view
Yeah.
that it's only words and we shouldn't crack down on people speaking, then we shouldn't be cracking down on Islamic State's social media. I think we should. I think we should be blocking, censoring, banning Islamic State's propaganda and encouragement everywhere we can. But if we took your view of don't block words only, you'd have to be giving freedom to Islamic State to express their view too. And I wouldn't agree with that.
I think they should. I think you can say what they want because if you, like their point of view, their fundamentalist Islamic point of view, anyone who gets drawn to that is going to be, I think, sociopathic by nature, and they're going to get drawn to something. People who, because I mean, idea is, I think of any religious fanatic.
Yeah.
I think that is a product of ignorance.
Yeah, but it is. But it's encouraging 15-year-old girls to leave Britain and go to Syria. It encouraged a 14-year-old boy to motivate in England, to motivate a 17-year-old boy in Australia to launch an attack on Anzac Day, our main commemoration day. And the only reason that attack was foiled is because the teacher caught the boy sending a text in class, confiscated the phone, and saw the fucking text message. Now, he's been convicted.
What's the text message say?
It said, "Oh, I know, I'm going to go and blow up Anzac Day." And when they went through his social media and voices,
I'm trying to go through that process. Is like in school, it's like, oh shit. It's like, hey babe, what you doing?
Yeah.
Just gonna blow up this.
But he's actually now being convicted and he's in jail. Now, the power of words is incredibly strong, and it can inspire violence. And that's why I'll agree to disagree with you on this. I draw my line afterwards. You draw the line before words.
I think the call to violence, you might have a case there. You know, I don't think there is. Well, then again, let's try and put our heads into the average person who's fighting for ISIS. Okay. I think. Okay, I really can't do it. Actually, I'm struggling here.
Let me do it for you. So, have you seen that video that's been going around on social media about the CIA agent who talks about interrogating?
Did you hear about the CIA funding fake ISIS videos, or creating fake ISIS videos?
Oh, that'd be a good idea. But the CIA agent tells a story, and I've seen similar stories, of an interrogation of a Taliban person. And the Taliban person said, you know what we find ironic? Firstly, no one ever perceives themselves as the bad guy. People perceive themselves as the good guy. And this Taliban guy said, and if you look at the United States film industry, there are these great heroic films like Independence Day and Star Wars where the good guys are this impoverished, low technology rebel tribe fighting against the big evil dictators with all the money and all the power. And the Taliban say, we perceive ourselves as Luke Skywalker and we perceive you as Darth Vader. And
they wouldn't be too wrong with the way, if you look at the way the US enacts its foreign policy.
Yeah, that's right.
I can see why disenfranchised portions of the population in the Middle East would feel very.
Bad.
I think a lot of it
is valid.
I think a lot of conflict around the world, and I think radicalization in Islam, a lot of it comes from the Israeli and Palestine conflict. I think it's really all epitomized there. Just
Can I give you a funny story? I was getting my hair cut in January last year before I went to Colombia. I got psoriasis on my skin. It's a weakness that.
How's Colombia? I'm going there in February.
Fantastic. Well, you got to look up my mate Ollie. Anyway. So I shaved all my hair off because it's good to get sunlight and salt onto the psoriasis. So I'm sitting there in Florida getting the hair taken off and chatting to the hairdresser as you do. And she said, "What are you doing?" I told her, and you must travel a lot. Yes, I have. And she said, "Well, so you must understand that Iran is the biggest threat to peace in the world." And I looked at her and I said, "Well, actually, that's not what surveys say." And she said, "What do surveys say?" And I say, "Well, other than the United States and Israel, and Pakistan that perceives India and India that perceives Pakistan, no, I have no idea. I said every other country in the world perceives the greatest threat to peace as the United States.
Yeah.
Which I realise is a
of
dangerous
course.
thing to say to an American girl with scissors around your neck. And she said,
No,
that can't be true.
Americans would probably agree with you.
Well, she did after I explained it to her, and I said, put it this way. I said, since the Islamic Revolution in Iran, how many countries has Iran invaded, bombed, or had a war with? And the answer is one. And I said, since 1980...
Iraq.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Iraq, yeah.
Yeah. And since the Islamic Revolution, now you have to count Yemen too, so it would be two. But since the Islamic Revolution, I said, how many countries has the United States invaded or bombed?
Wait, Iranians are fighting Yemen?
Yeah. The Yemeni war is a Saudi versus Iranian proxy war.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know. I'm obviously a bit ignorant about this. I knew about the Saudis' involvement.
Saudis backing one side and the Iranians are backing the other.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, look, it's really interesting. This is where the US get Middle Eastern foreign policy so wrong.
It's like a Cold War between.
But it's been going on for generations. No, the
Shiites and Sunnis.
Well, not just Shiites, Sunnis, and Wahhabists. It's about Persia versus Arabia.
Oh yeah.
And
classic tribal warfare.
So one of the reasons Netanyahu hates Obama is Obama has called the bluff on Israel. Up until recently, US foreign policy has all been it's about the Muslims trying to kill the Jews. It's actually not. What's going on in the Middle East is it is a three-way contest between Egypt, relatively secular Islam, against Saudi, Wahhabist Islam, against Iran, Persian Islam, in which Israel's just the football. But if they go and fuck Israel, it's just to prove that one of them's got the bigger dick than the other one. And to really understand the Middle East, you've got to understand that interaction between Egypt, Saudi, and Iran. Now, think before the Islamic Revolution, Iran and Egypt were extremely close. And indeed, the Shah of Iran was married to King Farouk of Egypt's sister. And the Shah of Iran today is buried in Cairo in the mosque next to the mosque where King Farouk is buried.
Interesting bit of trivia.
So, after the Islamic Revolution, what Iran was trying to do was destabilize Egypt by funding the Muslim Brotherhood. When the Muslim Brotherhood came into power in Egypt after they threw out Mubarak, who was the first head of state that visited Egypt? It was Ahmadinejad from Iran, which got the Saudis all shitting themselves, because if you had Iran and Egypt joining up, that was going to threaten the Saudis. So the Saudis get on the phone to the Israelis and say, hey, we can't let this happen. So the Israelis and the Saudis go off into the US and say, you can't have this happen.
Isn't it funny that the unholy alliance between the Saudis and Israel, and essentially the Saudis are buying second-hand Israeli weapons?
That's right. So the Saudis go into Israel and go to the United States and say, we can't let this happen. So we now fund the overthrow of Morsi. And in comes al-Sisi. Al-Sisi gets rid of the Muslim Brotherhood and sidelines the Iranians again. Meanwhile, to make things a little bit happier amongst the Saudis and the Egyptians, al-Sisi offers to give those two little islands at the end of the Red Sea back to the Saudis, which the Egyptian court then stops. And then when you now see what's happening on the financial war between Saudi and Iran to go with the shooting war in Yemen, you've got the Saudis who recognize that the Iranians need oil prices to be $70 or more per barrel to balance their budget. And now that the sanctions have been lifted against Iran, they could sell more of their oil, but the Saudis refuse to bring the OPEC price down unless all OPEC members agree to their production outputs from 2 years ago. In other words, the pre-lifting of sanctions outputs of the Iranians. So when you start to bring all of this together and look at oil prices, look at OPEC, look at Middle East, in a contest not of Israel, but as a contest of who is dominant out of Iran, Egypt, and Saudi, you get a very, very different perspective of what's really happening in the Middle East.
Wow, I'm really, really thankful for that little piece you did there, because I think listeners and viewers are going to be a lot more enlightened and will come away with something to think about.
Understand the centuries, millennium-old antipathy between Persians and Arabs that well predates Islam. Yeah, just like the Irish. Yeah. Hmm. Well, so let me throw a theory at you. Why has multiculturalism worked comparatively better in Australia and Canada than it has in the United Kingdom and France? And one of the theories I have is Canada and Australia are relatively new-founded cultures, only a couple of hundred years old. Well, not as much blood in the hands, but also they've never had a fixed culture once Europeans came. There's a fixed culture in Australia up until 1788, but once Europeans came, it was a moving feast. It was prisoners, then it was white settlers, then it was the Chinese for the gold rushes, then it was the post-war boom of the Italians and the Greeks, and then it was the Vietnamese, now it's the Somalians and the Indians. So when you have a culture that is fluid, it's much easier to change with new incoming groups. When I look at Australia of 1970 when I was a kid, I was born in 66, and I look at Australia now, it's a vastly different culture. But
so I want to talk a bit more about your trip through Central Asia. What place made the biggest impression on you? Was it Turkmenistan? I hear it's like the North Korea of Central Asia.
No, not at all. I heard people say that. People say it's halfway between North Korea and what do they say? It was halfway between North Korea and somewhere else. I can't remember. No, it's like Dubai. Massive, especially Ashgabat, the city. Brand new modern architecture, an enormous amount of infrastructure being built as a result of oil and gas money.
What's the nightlife like there? Does it have much of a nightlife?
No, no, I didn't find any, not of any significance. And Islam's conservatism comes through.
Oh yeah, it does.
I don't think I was really looking in the right places either. Let's just say another trip needs to come up somewhere else.
You needed a naughty nomad guide for that one.
You do.
I'm really good at sniffing them out.
Right, we need to do a trip somewhere together one day. I just want to see how you work.
Oh yeah.
Anyway,
you'll have fun. Yeah, you're gonna wear a sombrero. Have to get you a sombrero and a sword.
Yeah. I have read that blog. Anyway, I think most people that compare Turkmenistan to North Korea have never been to North Korea. But I've been to North Korea. And
what's that like?
I'll look at my video. I did
see your video.
Yeah.
Your video is fantastic. I'm surprised they let you record so much.
Yeah, so was I. North Korea, you're not allowed to go anywhere without a guide. Whereas Turkmenistan, the guide finishes with you at the end of the day after you've been looking at the ruins of Merv or Samarkand, Merv or Mary Samarkand in Uzbekistan. No, you could do it on your own, but you do need to get a letter of invitation to get your visa.
You can go to like only 4 places as well, isn't it? You're restricted in your travel in Turkmenistan.
I didn't feel it. We drove from Uzbekistan past the gas crater down at Ashgabat, then I flew into Merv and Mary.
How did you do that? By the way, because it's really out of the way, no? The gas. For anyone who doesn't know, look up the Gates of Hell in Turkmenistan. Get on Google right now and look up the Gates of Hell.
Send them the link to my Turkmenistan video as well, because you can see that at the very start of it.
Yeah, I'll include that in the link description, guys.
Yeah, it's just a huge crater with this natural gas seeping out that's on fire, and it's just in the middle of the desert.
It looks like a hole in the earth, right?
So basically, if you drive from the Uzbekistan border down to Ashgabat, it's about 3 or 4 hours drive. You get to the Gates of Hell, camp there overnight, and then you drive down to Ashgabat.
So that was the place that made the biggest impression on you, was Turkmenistan?
No, I think it was Samarkand in Uzbekistan.
Samarkand, and that's I saw some great pictures from some mosques there. Was that the place that you took that great one with like a really sinister sky? Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
that looks great.
And that was where Tamerlane ruled from. And Tamerlane's, to give you an idea of how much wealth and power there was on the Silk Road when Europe was going through the
Tamerlane was that a Khan?
He ruled
Tamerlane
in.
Khan. He was Genghis Khan's godson, or sorry, grandson. Am I right to say?
Tamerlane
Or
was
he's
before.
one of the four sons. One of the four sons. Was it?
No, Tamerlane was before Genghis Khan.
Oh, before
Around
Genghis Khan.
Yeah, and then the Khans after Genghis Khan were his sons. Yeah, so Tamerlane was... No, hang on, I might have that wrong. Yeah, Tamerlane was about the year 1000. No. I've got my timelines all mixed up.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it was either just before or just after Genghis Khan. But he ruled what is now Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, huge amounts of territory.
Do you find them similar culturally?
In some ways, but you know what I find interesting is how each of the former Soviet republics are evolving post-Soviet Union, and they're all doing it relatively differently.
Tajikistan's an interesting case.
All of them are.
Georgia has become very Western. It's a beautiful place. I love Georgia.
Georgia's very Western. Armenia is stuck in its fights with Azerbaijan and Turkey. Kyrgyzstan, like they say, democracy is not how you get elected, it's how you leave office. And none of Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan or Turkmenistan have had a peaceful transition of power. Kazakhstan is still ruled by the same guy that was the ruler in the Soviet days. So is Uzbekistan, except the president just died of natural causes and they're about to have an election, so that'll be really interesting. Turkmenistan, the former leader, died and is replaced by his henchman, who's now been ruling. And Kyrgyzstan has had 4 or 5 revolutions. So none of them yet has done a free and fair election transition into a new leader. But think about this, going back to what we were saying earlier about Chinese dominance coming in. Each of those Central Asian republics has never had a democratic tradition. Before the current regime, they were Soviet. Before the Soviets, they were under different Khans. Before the Khans, it was the Mongolians. Before the Mongolians, it was Tamerlane. Tamerlane was before Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
Before Tamerlane were the Persians. Before the Persians, etc. You go right back to Alexander the Great. They've never had democracy. Democracy is important now because the Americans say it is. But what happens when the Chinese are the dominant culture? When that sort of stuff's not as important to the dominant culture anymore? Is it going to matter for a country that's never had democracy to not have democracy?
What's your views on democracy?
Ask me after the US election.
Do you think it's going to be rigged? You're predicting... No, you don't. You don't.
I think it's going to be rigged. Back in May, I wrote an article saying if the left are not careful, Trump will win in a landslide because...
You predicted Trump victory, right?
Back in May...
You're going against the polls. And
Wait. Back in May, I said that.
Yes, you did, and you were the first person. You wrote for a mainstream.
The Independent.
Yeah, it was the first article. I said you called it before anyone. I remember linking to that.
And I
actually bet money on it. I bet money on just around that same time. I bet money on a Trump victory.
Donald Trump's doing his best to lose the election. Do you
think he's doing it? Do you think it's like he's trying?
I don't know. It wasn't his fault.
There's a lot of people made there was one conspiracy about it, conspiracy theory about it, that he was setting himself up to lose. But I don't. But maybe it's a case where. No, I don't buy it either. I don't buy that. And even if he was, he'd probably say, "Oh shit, this is working. Screw that. I'm gonna."
Yeah. No, he's enough of a narcissist to think that he was actually going to win.
But I think actually, this is a good thing to go because the problem with this thing, if we talk about Trump versus Hillary
Clinton.
and make predictions in 2 weeks, then this broadcast will be outdated.
Yeah.
So really quick, you calling a Trump victory?
Look, the reason I wrote what I wrote back in May was because the left wasn't giving respect to the genuine views held by some of the Trump supporters.
Yes.
Summarised by Clinton's talking about the basket of deplorables. No, there are genuine fears in the community that have to be given an airtime and a decent response. Yeah. And I didn't think the left was going to do that, but I didn't anticipate the fact that Trump pays no tax. I didn't anticipate the grab him by the pussy. I didn't anticipate any of that.
That really hurt him in the polls. I grabbed him by the pussy, but a lot of people actually end up liking him more because of that. Well, man, I doubt women did. I don't think women. My listeners were like, yeah, man, grab him by the pussy, but
yeah, I mean, your
I'm sure
listeners
it didn't go over with women.
Yeah, your listeners are going to be going, yeah, and. So look, I don't know. I think it's going to be close.
It's very close.
I'm not going to rule Trump out. I'm not going to rule Clinton out at this stage. I really don't know. Let me give you a strange analogy.
WikiLeaks has a big part to do with it. I think if they say there's another drama, they got an A bomb to drop before the election on Clinton.
Too late.
So.
Too late. Too many people are voting already. But I mean, and I'll tie this in with WikiLeaks because WikiLeaks is run by Julian Assange.
Yes.
Who's Australian. And Australians...
Is he Australian?
Yeah.
Why do you think he was Swedish?
Because he's accused of raping the Swedish girls. That's why he's in the Ecuadorian embassy. But Australia has compulsory voting. And the reason this is important is in Australia...
you guys find people who don't vote. I love that.
Yeah, I love it too. So the only way you win an election in Australia is you pinch one side's votes. The only way the Labor Party can win is by pinching the Liberal Party's votes. The only way the Liberal Party can win is by pinching the Labor Party's votes. In the United States, it doesn't matter. Democrats aren't going to vote Republican and Republicans aren't going to vote Democrat. It's about getting your side out to vote and who can inspire their people to go out the most. So I say that if you analyse the US election by comparing Trump to Clinton, it's a flawed analysis. You've got to compare Clinton to Obama and compare Trump to Romney. And
Trump is a lot more. His voters are a lot more energized.
And there we go. So
that's going to be the decider.
Yeah. So if Obama got this many votes, and if Obama got this many votes and Romney got this many votes, you ask, will Clinton get more or less votes than Obama? Well, she'll get less. So it's down here. Does Trump get more or less than Romney? And if you think he gets more than Romney, then it's up like this. The question now...
But what happens is, it's not about the energized Clinton supporters, it's the people who hate Trump so fucking much, how energized are they?
Yeah. And this theory that's going around about now that Trump is driving the debate into the gutter just to turn everybody off, that's got some merit because that would actually mean a lot of the people who don't love Clinton just go, fuck, I'm jack of all of this, and don't turn up.
Okay, so let's just say, right, Trump gets elected. What does the world look like in 4 years' time?
Yeah, I don't know. It's scary.
No, you know, it's like Brexit, man. Nobody knows.
Well, look, I think regardless of who wins, it's going to be a scary future because whoever is president, Clinton or Trump, neither of them is going to be able to get anything done.
And yeah, exactly. This is the whole thing. People make such a big deal about it, but ultimately, it's of little consequence. They can change a few things here and there, but you have to go up against Congress and that kind of thing. And
that's it. I mean, neither presidential candidate will have the legitimacy in the minds of the other people to get a free run. No, I mean, if Clinton wins,
should be the most unpopular elected president in history, I think.
Yeah, and that's what the stats say. And if Trump wins, he'll be the most unpopular. And if Trump wins, he'll be the oldest. And if Clinton wins, he'll be the second oldest. I mean,
wow.
The big story in the US election is how do they get two so unpopular candidates to be the only two running?
Because the DNC colluded to get Sanders out of the race. I mean, people wanted Sanders.
But Sanders wouldn't have won. I mean, Sanders winning is like Jeremy Corbyn winning. It's just not going to happen.
I think if Sanders had went up against Trump, it would have been a landslide in Sanders' favour.
Look, you might be right on that because you wouldn't have the anti-Hillarys. But
yeah, well, I think Sanders and Trump, their supporters are one and the same. They're both anti-establishment candidates.
Yeah.
And people are just tired of the norm, and people want to turn over the apple cart.
Now, Mark, I've got to make a move actually in a minute.
No problem, man. Just for people listening, so you've been in 140 countries, and you'd make great videos. You have a book out there. How do people learn and find out all about Andrew MacLeod?
www.andrewmacleod.com.au. It's
MacLeod, sorry, I called you
MacLeod. That's all right. MacLeod is the old Celtic
Yeah, see,
pronunciation of it anyway,
we got
so it doesn't
MacLeod's
matter.
here. That's why that's how we say it down here.
Yeah. So www.andrewmacleod.com.au, or you can find me on Twitter at Andrew M. MacLeod is my Twitter handle, and my travel blog is whyslowdown.com.
Fantastic, and thanks a million, Andrew, for coming on the show.
My absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to seeing you face to face again sometime in the future. We'll
Absolutely. Just so you know, the last time me and Andrew met was the Campbell Apartments in Grand Central Station, New York. We shared a pint there, right?
Yep.
Pro tips from the World Traveller. Listen, I can't wait to hang out for a pint again. I'm sure we'll hook up in a mutual adventure at some stage. Right, thanks a million, Andrew, right?
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
It's crude, it's trashy, it ain't too classy. It's Hangover Radio. Screwed, it's trashy, it ain't too classy. It's Hangover Radio.